Sometimes in life, it's the smallest of margins that frustrate us most. Missing the bus by a minute, the lottery being one number out on all of your chosen numbers, the 2 minutes extra you leave the cake in the oven and then it burns, and of course being second top scorers in the division, but being just one goal short of finishing in the playoffs. There's so many moments over the course of the season that we could pinpoint and say that was it. But in truth, it's an accumulation of a number of factors that saw Mansfield Town fall short by the narrowest of margins. Tonight on the final Mansfield Matters podcast of the season, we'll head back through the season and share our thoughts on the campaign as a whole, discussing the highs and the lows of the journey we've all been on. We'll also cast our eye to the future as Nigel Clough signs his new contract for a further season. The retain list also has been released with 0 shocks. Bye, Danny! As ever, we welcome and value your comments and opinions in the live feed, so come and have your say for one final time on your team. This is the Mansfield Matters Podcast, proud to be part of the talkSPORT fan network. Hello, good evening and welcome to the Mansfield Matters Podcast, the show for the fans, by the fans. It's been a long old season where the finest of margins really did leave us exaggerated, out of breath, frustrated, you name your superlative. That's what happened at the end of the 2022-23 campaign. Thanks so much for joining us over the course of the season. We're here for one final time to discuss all things Mansfield Town, to look back over the course of the season over the next 90 minutes and get it all out of the way and prepare ourselves up here in our heads, ready for the new campaign. Joining me tonight, we've got a whole host of guests. Yes, it's not just me in here. We've tried to do something fancy now. We've got not one, but, ready for this, 2 cameras. There we go. I'm there as well. Look at that. Happy days. Joining me in the room tonight, long-serving stalwarts of the Mansfield Matters podcast. Good evening to Clive Parkin.
Good evening, Craig.
Good evening to Nick of Mansfield Town Shirts fame.
Good evening, Craig.
I always refer to you as that. Have you noticed that? Every single time, it's always Nick of Mansfield Town Shirts fame.
It's the only fame I get.
Exactly. Alan Wilson, the man of the voice.
Good evening, Craig. Good evening, everybody.
And after a superb appearance last time via mobile phone, we've got him here in person. He replaces Cam Felton in a late substitution tonight. Let's say hello for a second appearance on the podcast to Jim Evans. Good evening. Welcome.
Good evening.
Glad to have you with us.
Thank you.
Good to have you with us. As always, we apologise in advance if anything tech-wise goes belly up. We'll just call it a little bit like our season, where, you know, everything's in line to work perfectly, but something might happen and it might drop out at some point. But we'll try our best to persevere. At some point tonight as well, it won't just be us 5 in the room. We are going to be heading global as we catch up with our Norwegian stag. Internet connections pending and all of that stuff in between. But as always, we value your comments at home as well. So come and have your say on your team to talk all things 2022-2023. Lots of you already saying hello and good evening. As Jamie says, it's been a season of ups and downs, a lot of injuries, but not having the right people to cover has cost us big time. Absolutely, we'll delve into that shortly. Before we delve into the season as a whole, let's go through the 5 of us here and talk about that final day at Colchester. Because, Jim, we were 1 goal shy in the end, and there was a split second in my head where I thought, we might just do it here. Did you have the same thought?
I did. When Leighton Orient went 1 up at Bradford, I thought, after they lost 3-0 to Stockport, I thought they're going to want to, do the job here at Bradford. And when we went 1-0 up as well, I thought, yeah. And then when Bradford equalised, I just thought, maybe not. Then obviously when we scored and then Salford went 1 down, I thought, yeah, but just wasn't to be. I think it just sums up the season, really.
Alan, you were sort of saying beforehand when we were sort of stood outside in the garden having a bit of a catch-up that you believed you were one of only a few to say that we would actually finish in the playoffs this season. So what was it about Nigel Clough's Mansfield that made you think, actually, we can do this?
I just thought we were good enough. With the players that we've got a few injury players back, but Keeler Dunn, when he hit the ball, my wife always got a thing that, whenever she sees the ball hit the ball, that's it. Whoever hits the ball doesn't win. And I thought, well, That's done it already then. But, they gave it a good go. I'm pleased to see Gale got on the score sheet again, because I think he will come good in the end. And it was just like Jim said, it wasn't to be. So close, but yet so far.
Nick, there's a bit of an irony about what the shirts that you brought with you tonight, isn't there?
There is. It's the.
Oh, here we go. No, not you. Interrupted by a podcast dog. Goodbye.
It is.
You just bursting in.
It wasn't necessarily the one goal off. It was the predicted position for us next season. Although even I'm not that optimistic. We were really close at the end of the day. I think it's going to be a blessing in disguise missing out. And I know that's going to sound a bit strange, but I didn't feel the devastation that I felt in previous seasons where we just missed out. I think we were quite unprepared for the playoffs and not necessarily quite ready with a fit squad. I think we go again, a bit of a summer break. But I started to believe about 84 minutes in, something like that. I thought, actually, it only really needs another Gillingham goal, and Hawkins missed a chance, so the shirt didn't work last time.
So it's
and I
your
thought
fault.
one goal for them and a goal for us, which turned out we got in the end, would have been enough. But yeah, it's close, but we'll go again next season, I think.
Clive, it was very frustrating, wasn't it, when we were watching it? Because, the scores were filtering through. We were saying all the way down on the coach to not think too much of it. What will be. But the longer the game went on, when we scored that second goal and we were pushing and we heard scores from elsewhere, I think we were all trying to scream and get that ball across the line. We'd have taken anything, wouldn't we?
Well, I never expected us to get into the playoffs, so in that respect, I've protected myself from disappointment. But, of course, when you get that close, you just want something to happen. The fatalist in me said it's not going to happen. No, the other teams that we're required to do what they've got to do for us to be in that position don't like us enough to do it. And so I don't think, on balance, I think finishing 8th was about right. It was what I've referred to earlier in the year as an upsy-downsy season. And I think where we finished is appropriate for what we actually achieved in the year. So disappointed on one level. I'm quite relieved. I think it'll share a bit of Nick's point here. Let's put it behind us now. Use it as a platform to strike forward next year and hopefully have fewer injuries.
Well, we can put it behind us in around an hour's time. We've still got to delve into it, and we are now going to rip the plaster off. It was, in the end, Jim, one goal, which was the difference between 7th and 8th. One goal between having another shot at promotion. And I guess there were lots of niggly things all over the season as well, which contributed to it. But when you look back through the season, I actually was looking back and I actually thought, I know what's cost us. And it's not being prepared for that opening day at Salford. I think had we, gone into that game a little bit more prepared, a little bit more ready and started with a bit more of a bounce, that could have been the difference to go all the way back and think, actually, sometimes it's not how you start, it's how you finish, but how you start has a big impact, doesn't it?
It does, but I think on reflection, because you get sort of time to think about it a bit more deeply when the season's finished, I think actually losing at Wembley last year is affecting the whole, being in the playoffs last year has affected this season, and it's made us a bit blunt this season. I really do. I'm only a fan of being in the playoffs if you've got a really good chance of winning it, because I really do think, it's another month of pressure football in an already knackered squad, and it just costs you. You have an interrupted pre-season, which is vital to have a good season, to have a good following season, and I just think it cost us this season, and I think the sort of emotional and physical hangover. And I think you'll see it next season with 3 of the 4 teams are in it now. I really do, and I know what you mean. It's how you start. We didn't start well at Salford, but we know what our shortcomings are. But I think I agree totally with Nick. I think it's a blessing in disguise that we're not in it this year. I think it all stands in good stead for August.
Clive, when you look back through the season, Nigel Clough listed a number of different factors. What's the one pinpoint you go, that's the moment?
Well, there are lots of them, but I'd go back right to the beginning of the season, how we didn't come away from Leyton Orient with a win. God only knows, because we controlled the game. We had a first-minute penalty, which we opted to miss. And their fans were coming out of the ground after that game on a stinking hot day.
Oh, yeah.
Couldn't believe how they got the game, how they got the 3 points. So you could pick that one, but there are lots of others. And Clough pretty much nailed it with his list, I thought.
Yeah, he certainly did. Nick, if you were to pinpoint one particular moment in the season which
was the 1%. Adam Murray used to say it's the 1% which add up, and I think, in reflection, he's absolutely right this season. What was the 1% for you?
I think it was, I'm going to say, reasonably end of the sort of very start of the season was those home games where we just were very, very lacklustre. I mean, we've got a list in front of us here, but the 2-0 up at Hartlepool, and that was the best we'd played, I think, up to that point, potentially apart from the Leyton Orient game. We were 2-0 up and absolutely cruising against Hartlepool. They looked a very poor side. Their fans were going home after about 70 minutes.
Yeah.
And when within 15 minutes, it was 2-2. And games like that, and I think then we lost a couple. I know we beat Walsall, but we lost a couple after that. And I just think games like that happen too often. Barrow was another one. Were we not 2-0 up against Barrow and lost 3-2? Those games at home, I think, were the ones that cost us, where we were comfortable and cruising, and we just took our foot off the gas a little bit. They get one goal, and all of a sudden, you've dropped. There's 5 points there that you've dropped just with a little bit of lack of concentration. I think those at home, we wouldn't have done that last season. I think that's the difference this year. We wouldn't have done that. I mean, away, you cannot. If you've gone to every away game this season, you've got your value for money. But I think at home, we've just been a little bit off it early season, and I think that's kind of what cost us for me.
What do you think's contributed to that, Alan, the home form? Because if you look at the comparisons, realistically, home table, 13th, 9 wins, 8 draws, 6 defeats, 37 goals, 31 conceded, a total of 35 points with a +6 goal difference. That's nowhere near good enough. You have to have a balance in there somewhere. What is it about our home form this season? Is it the atmosphere? Is it not being able to hold onto a lead? Is it the increased number of fans? What's done it?
I think it's same as Nigel said in his end of season, roundup. It was the silly goals that let us down. Letting silly goals in. People, not marking and doing as they should be. And like when Kilgore came in, we didn't have so many of those, did we? We kept quite a few clean sheets, but I think it's the silly goals that if they eradicate those and we still keep the same, going forward, being the second top scorers, I think we'll be in for a better season next season. But I think it's just silly goals.
It's an interesting one, Jim, that because, we talk about the goals and it being one goal which we lost out on, but we were second top scorers in the league.
Yeah, don't be fooled though. We had 70, 72. We should have had 150. We should with the amount of chances we created. If we had Andy Cook this season, for me, people gone about that goal we let in against Swindon or that goal we let in against whoever or Crawley. We need 5 chances to score 1 goal, and we create them. We do. We just don't bury them. That's been the frustrating thing for me.
Yeah, Clive, are you worried about what could potentially come next season? Because we'll talk about the retain list in a little while, but one thing Nigel Clough sort of intimated at in that interview that he did was the fact that he doesn't necessarily feel like we need another striker.
No, and you either buy that or you don't. There are people who'll be watching this, and lots of people on the terraces say we definitely need a goal finisher, a striker, a fox in the box. We've not had that since Nicky Maynard, I suppose. And I think what we've managed to do is to be joint or second top goal scorers despite that. So there is an argument that says you actually don't need the striker, providing the rest of the team can cough up the goals. And I think I buy that, because you can't score as many goals as we did, albeit take Jim's point that we wasted a lot of opportunities without a striker and it not be a valid alternative to playing with a Cook up front. If you take Cook out of Bradford's season, they'll be in the bottom third. Now, that's the dependency factor that we don't have. So it's a good thing in that respect. But it's the good old-fashioned number 9 that lots of people crave for. We've not had one of those for a while.
Nick, where would you sit on it? Would you rather have that dependency? I mean, you look at a lot of last season when we had Rhys Oates before his injury, obviously was scoring for fun and really carried us. Walsall, you saw it this year with our friend Danny Johnson, didn't you? The first half of the season they were flying. Had they kept hold of him, no doubt they'd have been in League One now, and Flynn would have still been in a job at Walsall rather than at Swindon, having been sacked. But would you rather have that dependency, knowing that when it comes to the crunch, when it comes to these games in the season where we need that extra 1 or 2 goals, that we've got someone that 99% of the time is always going to pop up?
I think you do need. I mean, I'm thinking back to promotion seasons. Chris Greenacre scored twice as many goals as Matt Green scored probably twice as many goals as other people. you do look at most teams who are successful and win things. They've generally got. You don't have to look at Notts County and Wrexham. I know the ideal word is you get loads of goals from midfield, like the Disleys and Lawrences of the world and Cordons, plus your striker. But I think I'd rather have somebody who that's going to get on the end of the chances, a bit like Clive said, because you can't always rely. We've had loads of goals. Looking down the list of goal scorers there's probably 10 other players who've scored goals. But I just think we need that someone just to sort of propel that front. Like, you don't feel like you've got anyone leading the line. They're all a bit part players, aren't they? Oates, Swan, Bowery. They're all playing off other people, not really leading the line. I think we do need that. Most successful teams do.
I can't say it fills me with much confidence. Clough's comments about not getting a striker, and I think that might be just taking the expectancy away a little bit, Alan, because we have lost Will Swan back to Nottingham Forest. We might not get him again. Never fall in love with his own players. That's certainly true. But in terms of this season, we talk about the goals being an impact of the thing. We can't not talk about it, and I'm going to have a little rant later on.
Not like you, Craig.
I know.
That's a surprise.
Got it at the end of this. Got it for the last podcast, haven't you? But tactically, the tactical direction we've gone in this season, I take my hat off to Clough and say it was a tough decision to make, because the previous campaign, Forest Green, the other successful sides, Port Vale especially, utilised that 3 at the back, playing with wing-back system superbly well. We tried it in the summer, we tried it in pre-season, and to be fair, it worked, and we gave it a go at Salford. And we also said on the podcast after the Salford game, we probably needed another 2-3 weeks trialling it. But now we're into a league season. We stuck with it, but it was evident the more games that went on, we didn't have the personnel to play it. Is the reluctance to change it, and we're talking probably February time, maybe January if we're being kind, on a consistent basis, I mean week in, week out, is the failure to change it one of the percentage factors which we have to look at and go, that contributed towards that 1%, which cost us in the end?
You could say that, I suppose, but I don't particularly, bode well with that argument. I don't. Nigel plays whichever, way he wants to play, what players he's got available at that time. And he obviously sees them in training. He knows all the ins and outs, what they can do, what they can't do. Now, whether they're not doing their jobs, Nigel will coax them to do whatever. But I don't really buy that all the time. He played it with a certain way. It works sometimes, it doesn't work. And so we had to go to plan B. And sometimes we had a plan B, not always. But, I don't always agree with that. You play on your merits. You don't have to worry about anybody else. I'm a big believer in that. So whether it's 3 at the back, 4 at the back, I've never liked 3 at the back, as you know. I've said many a times on the podcast. I prefer 4-4-2. That's me, old school, whatever. But like I say, I don't always agree with, tactically, it wasn't right.
Yeah, maybe it's a different way of phrasing it, Nick. Maybe it is looking at personnel and going, well, when we had the personnel available to play it, when we were talking Hewitt playing wing back, right wing back, when we were talking Macker at left wing back, when we had the personnel to play it,
yeah.
I couldn't actually sit here and say it didn't work, because it did with those players, but it felt more often than not this season that those players weren't available and we were trying too hard to try and make the slipper fit.
Yeah, I think we were, and it stretched us at the worst possible positions, which was full-back, which we didn't have. We had one right-back, Kellen Gordon, who's technically a wing-back, and we had Macker, because Hewitt was playing the centre-back role, so we only had one of each. So, and the wing-backs are the most important in a 5, aren't they? And we didn't have that. We didn't have the depth, and it kind of stretches in the worst possible position, because you could argue that the 4-1-2-1-2 that he played last season stretched us in a good place, which was centre midfield, where we have about 10 of them. It's a great place to have loads of players, because we've got loads of centre mids, haven't we?
Yeah.
You could have an 11 of centre mids, but the one thing we didn't have was fullbacks, and he played a position where the emphasis becomes on the fullbacks. I think that's my only criticism. I'm kind of with Alan; they can't play what they want. The managers see the players more than I do, but to stretch us in a position that we clearly had no cover for was an interesting one for me.
We're going to get our international viewpoint very, very soon on the podcast. Clive, before we say hello to Stian and hello to our Norwegian stag, maybe one more popping up as well. I know you sort of when we're talking about players playing that position, we look at the January transfer window as a strong window. The summer window, not so much. Maybe we should have tried a little bit harder, and I think that's probably, like we said pretty much this time last week on the Clough contract situation, where the pressure's going to be on to get the deals right, but get them done in this window rather than 6 months down the line.
Yeah, I thought the club was a little bit complacent in the summer. I think they should have worked a bit harder to get some cover in key places. They didn't do it. We suffered from it. And let's remind ourselves, for the vast majority of the time he was a player at Mansfield Town, the big striker played in centre of defence. Now, you left to wonder what might have happened if Clough had got a slightly different view of the world and he'd kept Danny Johnson and played him alongside Ollie Hawkins. Would that have been a powerful strike force? We'll never know that. It's pure conjecture.
Yeah, absolutely. Right, time for you guys to take a quick break so you can.
Are you hearing me? Because I can't really hear you. I lost you when you changed the camera view.
Let me do that. Can you hear me now?
What? Now I can hear you.
There you go. I needed to keep the other camera on, but put this one big, and then I'll have to keep messing about with it. Anyway, how have you found this season watching from a land far, far away?
Well, it's been a season of ups and downs, as you said. I was thinking about it, looking at points where it did go wrong. For me, I think back to the 2 games, Leighton and Harrogate at home, how we couldn't get 1 point at all from those 2 games. I mean, that's it, where we lost it. And of course, how we didn't get anything from leading 2 home against Barrow. So, I mean, there's been some very frustrating games, haven't it? And I think that home game to Leighton was the only time this season I was actually confident when we went 1-0 up. But there you go.
Well, let's switch from Norway to Brazil and see if we can say hello to Tim. Are you there, Tim?
Hello, Craig. Hello, everybody.
Good, Tim. Great to see you. Thanks so much for joining us via Brazil. Just remind everybody about yourself and how you've been watching Mansfield Town this season.
Right. Well, I've been in Brazil for 35 years, so I kind of lost touch with the Stags to some degree. But then, since I've been able to pay for iFollow the last 3 years, then I've really got interested again and getting back. You know, I'm an old West Ham losing to Leicester kind of guy from 1967 or something. Went to Blackpool away, went to Leeds away the following season. What else can I tell you? I've been following it on iFollow. I've seen almost every game of the season, which is kind of lucky, I suppose. It turns out cheap. The quality of the iFollow is good. I had one problem where it was down for everybody. I had one problem which was on my computer. I just changed browser and that solved it. I agree with almost all the comments. You know, Alan very kindly put a question for me at the first Stag supporters meeting with some of the management. And the important question was, what are we going to do about the defence? And in January, we actually did something about the defence, and we stopped playing, you know, Hawkins at the back, and we didn't. You know, we didn't. We looked far better after that. We still look slow, and we've let in too many goals with balls over the top, which we just don't seem to be able to handle. I'm also critical, and it's not been mentioned in Mansfield Matters very often. You know, I'm not quite sure what the marking policy is when they're in the box, when we've got a corner against us. You know, I'm not quite sure what they're trying to do. It seems that very often the opposition get free headers. So I'm not quite sure how they're organising that. Never been able to understand it.
Well,
That's
maybe.
Go on. It's very frustrating that we've had so many games where we've hardly looked like scoring, and yet we're one of the top scorers in the division.
Well, maybe
difficult to understand.
Yeah,
Like
maybe
some games we manage it, and some games we don't look like it at all.
Maybe next season we'll get some answers. Stian, I'll come back to yourself. High points and low points of the 2022-23 campaign from your point of view, from watching from afar.
Well, from watching from afar, yeah, as I mentioned, 2-3 against Barrow, big low point, and from watching from afar, it must have been that away game against Crewe where I think we're 1-0 down going into extra time, and then Swan and Big Hawks saved us. So that must be like the big up point. And also I went obviously to Colchester and to actually watch them and to greet the players, even though it wasn't a playoff, but to just have those 10 minutes singing to the players after the game. I think that must be my high point from this season, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Tim, what about you? Highs and lows from a supporter's perspective?
Well, I think Barrow away, and I think that I'm disappointed with Clough bringing the subs on too late every time. He needs to give these other players more match time, more pitch time.
Yeah, absolutely. Gentlemen, I'm going to move swiftly on and talk about your hopes for next season, and then we'll keep you in the waiting room. We'll get you back on at the end of the show when we do our traditional end of season quiz. So you can keep listening in the guest room. You can play along as well. We'll get you back on at the end of the show. Hopes for next season. Stian, we were talking here earlier about the potential, whilst it's disappointing at the moment to not finish in the playoffs, that actually it could prove to be a positive thing and something for us to push on in the next season. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I thought this would be the season, though, with getting automatics. But I think for next season, I'm looking at least playoffs. But I agree with your points. I don't think we were good enough to play in the playoffs this season at all. But when you look at the table, you kind of think this should have been our season, because I don't think teams like Wrexham, Notts County coming up, MK Dons coming down, I don't look at the table and thinking it's going to be easier. But at the same time, with us perhaps having a normal season in terms of injuries, we should be in the mix.
Yeah, absolutely. Tim, finally from you, your hopes for the next campaign?
Well, I think one of the problems with Cluffy was playing too many players out of position. So if we've got a fixed, better squad and less injuries, then I guess we stand a better chance of getting into the playoffs or get promotion.
Excellent, gentlemen. Thanks so much for your contributions. We'll get you back on later on in the show. Stay where you are in the guest room. Find yourself a pen and paper, because in about half an hour's time, you're going to need it. Let's find out if Transatlantic Support actually knows more about what's happened this season than us five in the room. We'll catch you up later on. Tim, Stian, thanks so much for joining us. As always, if you guys at home want to get in the comments, feel free to do so. Jamie says Nigel Clough needs to show some guts next season and make some tough decisions to get it right. As always, if you want to have your say on your team, you are free to do so. And we'll get to them as and when we can. I appreciate there's a lot going on tonight. Before we talk retain list, Alan, let's talk goals and stats and things like that, and look at those little things this season. We've mentioned goals a little bit with the whole lack of firepower in some areas. Only one player managed to reach double figures, and that being, of course, Wolves Swan. Lucas Akins was just behind with 9. Then it's Lapsley on 7, Harbottle with 6, Keeler Dunn on 6, which is a huge achievement considering he only arrived in January.
I think it's very good. And like I say, I don't think it's, you don't necessarily need a 20-goal a season man either. Like Clive said before, we've had people chipping in from all over. You don't get the second highest scorers, it's not a fluke. They're obviously doing something right. and you've only got to get the 20 goal a season man injured, for like 6 months or whatever.
And we would do that.
Yeah.
And then, what happens? So, but who's to say, with my confidence and, head on again, that Gale's not going to get 20 next season? It might just come good.
Yeah.
It might be the jewel in the crown. Give him a chance and see what he can do. Because if we don't get Swan, you've got a ready-made replacement there.
Yeah, 4 goals for him this season in League and Cup. It's been a real good season for him. Elsewhere, scorers, Ollie Clark with 5, Ollie Hawkins departed with 5, George Maris got 5, as did Rhys Oates, Jordan Barry with 4, Gale, as we mentioned, with 4, Alfie Kilgore also contributing from the back with 4, Heron Boateng with 3, Quinn with 2, Kellen Gordon with 1, the man who tied his shoelaces with 1, Hewitt popped up with 1, as did McLaughlin, and 1 own goal, and a partridge in a pear tree. Interestingly though, Nick, let's talk assists, because top of the assist charts, joint, Stephen Quinn, George Lapsley, Elliot Hewitt and Lucas Akins with 8. The interesting two in that list, Elliot Hewitt, which obviously shows how much of a miss he's going to be next season, but also Lucas Akins, because found his feet in the latter half of the campaign playing in a forward position rather than at right wing back, which was a big tick. But also with those assists shows us that even despite his age, how much of an important player he is to the team.
I think to be one behind the top scorer and to be joint assist maker puts him quite high up in the rankings for this season. He's invaluable to me. I think he has to play up front alongside somebody who's got a bit of pace about them. And I think that's kind of where we should be aiming for next season. The Hoot one's really interesting. He played centre-back for most of the seasons, ended up with 8 assists. That's some going. Because he doesn't take free kicks, he doesn't take corners. It shows you how good he's been crossing the ball. And if you'd have asked me what my low point would be, it was finding out that he was injured, because he's going to be a massive miss for us next season. But yeah, Akins for me is a dead cert to start. I think he's had a lot of flack. I think that's sort of waning now the more people watch him. But yeah, I think him and somebody else could be a real partnership. And the Gale one, I don't think any fan would moan if we gave Gale a considerable amount of time. He doesn't have to score 20 goals.
No.
But I think just to give him the game time and allow him the time to develop, I don't think fans would care if we scored less or won less games. If we're giving people like him a chance, I don't think they would.
Because that's quite interesting. So in fact, you put it in the group, didn't you? You looked at teams who'd given the most amount of minutes to under 23 players. And whilst Gale wasn't necessarily an under 23 player, probably falls in that bracket, but Mansfield were actually the second worst.
Yeah, second low. I think the highest was 22,000 minutes, and we had 5,000, which was just above Stockport. Now, that you can read that 2 ways, because some of the teams near the bottom were also at the top of that list, so it's not necessarily a great thing.
Yeah.
But I think we just got the mix of experience and youth a little bit skewed. I think we could have given opportunities to others
I think
later on in the season.
Nick, that's reinforced by the injury crisis we've had. If you can't play younger players extra minutes when you're having an injury crisis to your key players, when will you play?
Well, Jason Law will be asking that question. We had, 10, 11 injuries at one point and he still didn't play. So the fact that we're talking to him about a new contract to me is bizarre.
If I was Jason Law, I love Jason Law, he's a lovely lad, but if I was him in his position, having been offered a new contract and having not played when it was clear there was numerous opportunities to play, I'd be thinking, I'm going to leave that on the back burner and I'm going to actively seek a club that wants to play me, because otherwise 100%. His career's done.
Yeah, 100%. If you're not going to play, in that last season that we've just had, then you've got no chance of playing ever, because you'll never get injuries like that again in one season.
Clive, you can have a choice of which topic you'd like to talk about. Do you want to talk discipline or do you want to talk injuries?
Oh, God. I could talk all day about injuries. I'll go for discipline.
Discipline-wise, I think we've improved on last season.
Notably because Quinn didn't get a sextuplet ban and he wasn't aided and abetted by Ollie Hawkins.
Still managed 9 yellow cards though.
Yeah. Hey, listen, if you're going to be competitive, and that means being aggressive, you're going to pick up yellow cards. I don't have a problem with that. The trouble is we sometimes get them very early in the game, and then the manager worries about whether they're going to get another one and pulls them off the game. And that destroys any game plan he might have had to start with.
Yellow cards in alphabetical order. Boateng got 1, Bowery 2, Clark 8, Gale 3, Harbottle 6, Hartigan managed 1, Hawkins got 4.
Yeah, Hewitt played 1 game.
Exactly, 1 game, 1 yellow card. Hewitt got 3, Kilgore 1, Keeler done 2, Callum Johnson 1, Danny Johnson 1, Lapsley 3, Law 3, Maris 5, McLaughlin 2, O'Toole 5. Who remembers John Joe O'Toole? Reese Oakes 2. Perch 8. Pim managed 3. Probably for time wasting. Quinn got 9. Reed with 1. Swan with 2. And Kieran Wallace with 7. In terms of Reds, Boateng 1. Bowery 1. Maris 1. Perch and Quinn 1 apiece. Felt like you wanted to say something else.
I was just going to say, how has John Joe O'Toole managed to spend enough time on the pitch to get 5 yellow cards?
Yeah, I know, absolutely. You're not wrong.
They must have had 5 games then.
Yeah.
He must have had.
It shows how good Kilgore is, though, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Sort of player
Yeah.
he is in the position he's playing to get 1 yellow card.
Yeah.
And play all the games he has. It's quite rare, I think.
Clark is a good example in there. He's got a fistful of yellow cards, and that's his
8.
game.
Yeah.
That's his game. He's a tenacious, aggressive, and sometimes a little bit foolhardy central attacking, sometimes defensive midfielder. But he always puts himself in there, and we've missed him this year. I think if next season we have Clark every game, we're a different team. So I have no problem with players getting disciplined if they're worthy. I mean, we had a couple of red cards this season that I thought we were very unfortunate for them to be awarded against the players. But that's League Two refereeing as much as anything, isn't it?
Yeah, it certainly is. Let's talk statistics in terms of fans in a minute, Jim. But first, let's get this comment from Carl. People need to understand what Lucas Akins offers. He was never brought to score goals. Seen him play plenty over the years against Burton. He always has a great game against us, and you can see why James Gale's staying and Jimmy Knowles has gone. I like Jimmy, but Gale's streaks ahead and will be a big player next season. Done fantastic when he's been given the chance. Hit the nail on the head with that comment. Let's talk one positive from this campaign, Jim, and that has been the rise in attendance. Buoyed no doubt by the second season post-COVID and the fact that we're getting more fans into the stadium towards the back end of last season. The expectation last season brought. But one thing we have done is, even when our home form has been nowhere near as good as what it should have been, we've managed to keep those fans, and already the season ticket sales for next season are already at a very good turnover. So I think we'll probably be able to maintain the same again next campaign.
I thought so, yeah. I mean, especially the fact we've had a statistically worse season this season than last season, to keep the attendances there, it shows that these fans are probably going to hang about. And it does make a difference. I just hope it goes over sort of 8,000-9,000. We get the Bishop Street sorted out.
I think it's
Don't hold your breath.
more chance of Jason Law getting a game. Average attendance at home this year, 6,696. The highest is 8,116 against Doncaster. The lowest, 5,421 against Carlisle. Remember that attendance is tickets sold, including season tickets. The average away following at the One Call Stadium was 518. The average home fans being 6,177. And they're superb stats. And I just hope that despite a poor home campaign, that those supporters do renew their season tickets and we can get the atmosphere back up to the level that it was last season. Because when the One Call is rocking, I think that plays a big impact. I think that would be big for us next season.
It does, and I think that a lot of that will depend on how the players perform. Because, like we said, we haven't played that well at home, and it does have an effect on the crowd. The drummer, Daniel, keeps going like he does. We get plenty of singing going, with the Quarry Lane as well as the West Stand.
Can next season, if we are just picking things that we don't want for next season, can we never sing in 1987 again, please? That'd be just great.
Yeah,
You'll
I
have
don't
to
understand what they're saying.
You'll have to have a word about that. But yeah, I think on behalf of the crowd and the atmosphere and whatever, if the team are performing, which they haven't quite done at home this year, like they did last year. I mean, look at the away following. And we've won 12 games away. Is it 12?
Yeah.
We won 12 away, and it's unbelievable away.
New Football League record, that, by the way. Club record wins away in Football League. 40 points on the road. Average away following 913. The highest 2,826 at Doncaster. The lowest 200 at Newport. You were one of them.
200 on a miserable Tuesday night in Newport is not. It's not a criticism.
Good. No, that's a positive, I think. Yeah.
And I think that 200 is far more than some clubs in our league ever got as an away following. So I think we have stimulated away fans better than we've stimulated home fans this season.
Yeah.
And I think it all starts and finishes on the pitch. What we need is a good start, an early piece of positive action ideally an early goal, and the crowd get up for it. If it's just like swimming in treacle, like some of the matches have been this year, the crowd feel that and they don't react positively enough. So I think we have to hit this season with a bit more vigour than we started the new season than we did this season, in my opinion. But the good thing about the crowds is there's bound to be a little bit of shrinkage because we've failed to do what some fans bought season tickets expecting to see, which was promotion. But at the same time, I think they've seen a team that's gone through crisis and worked their socks off during that time. And some of the players that were being criticised early in the season became a bit more heroes during the second half of the season, which was good. But the other enticing thing is we've got some fixtures next year which are going to be highly desirable. The two coming up from the conference, we've got teams coming down. I think we've got more to look forward to this year. And of course, we don't have to go down to Leighton Orient again this year.
So we do have to go to Forest Green. So what goes around comes around. My thanks to Martin Shaw for the excellent stats. Keep doing a superb job on iFollow and on StatsNet with all your stat collating. That's almost it for reflections on the 2022-23 campaign. We're going to take a short break in a minute, which will last about 10 seconds. Just enough time for us all to dive into the custard creams. And then we're going to talk retain this. But before we do, we need to wrap things up for this season. And I want a high and a low point from each of you on the panel. Jim, I'm going to start with you. I want one positive thing that you're going to take away from this campaign and one thing you want to improve on. Not a negative, because we don't do negatives. We're a positive panel.
A high and an improvement point, right.
Microphone to the lips, please.
High point with the amount of chances created. And something to improve on, depth in the squad.
Alan.
High point, Alfie Kilgore. Low point, get somebody at the side of him.
Nick.
Low point, as I said, was hearing about the Hewitt injury. That really set me back a bit. That one, that wasn't the best news. The high point for me was the emergence of James Gale at the end of the season. I think that made me think actually a lot more positively about next year.
Clive?
High point, the first 25 minutes at Carlisle.
The low point every minute after that.
The low point, the last 2 minutes at Swindon, which ultimately cost us a place in the playoffs.
Yeah, absolutely. For me, I think in terms of the low point in terms of things to improve on, not changing quick enough in terms of both tactically in terms of switching from the three at the back when we didn't have the players available, like we touched upon, but also in games when it was clear that we needed some fresh legs. We were a little bit too hesitant at times to bring them on. A substitution in the 85th minute for me doesn't have an impact on the game. You have 5 substitutions this season. It was a rule which was brought in after the COVID experiment. I personally like that rule, and I think we didn't utilise it to our advantage enough. So I'd like to see that built upon and tweaked next season. But a high point and a positive, and it's one thing we've not particularly spoke about, is the fact that whilst we were sometimes inconsistent between home and away, in terms of league standing consistency, after the 5th game of the season, we never once dropped out of the top 10. And I think that's a real good standing of, even when things weren't going well, we had a bit of a dip from 4th down to 9th at one point, midway through the season after about 14, 15 games. We managed to stay in that top 10. We always managed to stay near that rope which we're dangling and give ourselves hope. If we'd have been up and down all season, I don't think I would have had as much confidence going into next season. So the fact that we managed to do that after 5 games and stay in that top 10, I think is a real big plus point. Right, we're going to take a very short break. It'll be longer if you listen to the audio version of this, because ching, 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 money, 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 advert, advert, advert. talkSPORT deal. But if you're watching the video version of this, it'll be about 10 seconds. So don't go anywhere, because when we come back here on the Mansfield Matters podcast, we're going to talk 2023, 2024. Welcome back to the Mansfield Matters podcast, the show for the fans, by the fans. Well, I said We'll all be here after the break. Everyone's gone and left me now. I don't know where they've gone, so it's just me now for the next half an hour. No, I'm absolutely joking. They are still here. Hello, everybody. There they are. Give a wave to the camera in the corner. Great to have you with us. Right, let's talk 2023, 2024. And we start with the retained list. Going through that. If you missed it, here's a little recap. Retained and under contract for the next seat for the 2023-24 campaign. Lucas Akins, Hiram Boateng, Jordan Bowery, Ollie Clark, James Gale, Anthony Hartigan, Elliot Hewitt, Callum Johnson, Davis Keeler-Dunn, Alfie Kilgore, George Maris, Owen Mason, Stephen McLaughlin, Rhys Oates, John Joe Toole and Lewis Reed. Option triggered, therefore under contract, Taylor Anderson and Scott Flinders. Discussions underway with George Cooper, Jason Law, James Perch, Stephen Quinn and Kieran Wallace. Thoughts, Alan?
I hope George Cooper signs, because I really like that lad. I think he could be another quality addition, especially in the defence where we've been struggling. I really do like the looks of George Cooper, and I think there's some usual names, good squad, basis of a good squad, and let's just get a few quality additions. We know where we need them. Get out there while they. I've noticed today that Lincoln has got rid of one of their main defenders, or they've let him go, and Wrexham's put in a bid in. Everybody, let's get in there quite sharpish, because Nigel said he'd already got his sights on the people who he wanted to bring in. Let's get it done, soon as rather than later, so they can go on the pre-season.
In terms of people released, Jim, no shocks whatsoever. Danny Johnson, that was coming a mile off. Anybody that thinks otherwise, that didn't think that was going to happen. Wow. And Jimmy Knowles, disappointed for the lad, but given his age and given his injuries, he's not really broken when he's had the chance. And when you compare him to James Gale, I think they're two different worlds apart, aren't they?
Yeah, and I think if you look at Danny Johnson and Jimmy Knowles, they're penalty box players, and it's just not. That's all they do. When you look at Nigel Clough, he's not about that at all. I always think, well, why did he sign Danny Johnson? Because he's the player that he was at Leyton Orient. He didn't change. So it's like they've not done the due diligence on him. Why did they sign him in the first place? He doesn't go in for that kind of strike.
It makes you wonder whether Clough actually signed him or not.
Well, it just something doesn't stack up there for me. So it's not a surprise to see him go at all. I just a bit more thought into signings, would be nice. But I'm very positive, looking forward to next season. I think the nucleus of the squad is going into a new season is better than I can ever remember it going into a season for a long time.
Nick, thoughts on the core of that squad? I think we're probably a little bit surprised, but there's no saying that this won't happen, particularly with John Joe Toole, because he's not played. He's obviously been out injured. For me, I think it's been a big miss because he was the core of the previous campaign. And I think he still would offer us something, but obviously he was transfer listed in January, didn't get a move. And I think, and this is not to have a dig, we obviously had that thing in January when we got rid of Ollie Hawkins about the age thing, and yet we've still got a core of the squad there who are very much older than what Ollie Hawkins was. So it brings into question that directional thing. But if the players brought through the door are of a younger age and it balances out that way, that's the long-term vision coming to fruition.
Yeah, I think we need the younger lads in. I'd like to run a predictor of what League Two club Danny Johnson will score against us playing for next season, because that's bound to happen.
Swindon.
Write that down already. In terms of O'Toole, for me, I think he's still. I think the time's ran for that. I think when he stepped into midfield against Northampton in the playoffs, I thought he was unbelievable,
dream team,
and I thought he's going to play there next season. And he just didn't. He just never appeared, did he? Really? So I think his time's gone. And I think I think we just need pace. I think that's all we really. I don't think young or old. I don't mind if they're fast and old. It doesn't matter to me. I just think we lack that youthful exuberance that some clubs have come to Mansfield and played with. They've not necessarily. I've not seen a team come to Mansfield have been better in quality, but I've seen teams have more pace and more dynamism, especially on the wings. And I think just that little bit of injection of pace around the likes of Quinn, Clark, Perch, all those sort of players who are experienced and sort of our stalwarts of the team, a little bit of pace in and around them. I think that's what we need. But I didn't. There were no surprises for me, apart from I didn't realise O'Toole was still under contract.
Interesting question from Nathan in the comments, which I'll put to you, Clive. A keeper, or would you put Flinders as number one and Owen Mason as number two? Owen Mason, by all accounts, has had a superb season of development. He's been on loan to a number of clubs. He's obviously got call up with Republic of Ireland under 19 squad, got some really vast experience, and I know he's highly rated. Scott Flinders, when we saw him play this season, was absolutely superb and would be a superb number one for any Football League club. So what would your take on that be? Because for me at the minute, I don't necessarily think that goalkeeper is the number one position that we need to recruit for.
You've just answered my question, your own question. Absolutely. Flinders has not put a foot wrong, in my opinion, and I think he's on our books, he's our player, he wants to be here. Give him the number one jersey. I don't know enough about Mason, but he's been going through the ranks. He's an international, and why not? He needs to develop, and the way to develop is to be guaranteed a number two slot.
Yeah, I think so. And when you've got Adam Collin as well, who's a very capable coach and a capable third choice if you needed him, you can always dip into the loan market for emergency goalkeepers. It's very different. Obviously, people will be asking the question about Pim, Nick. Maybe people might be throwing Nathan Bishop's name into the mix as well. I think we probably need to move on from those. And learn from that thing of never falling in love with loan players.
I just think Owen Mason, if he's going to make it at Mansfield, he's going to have to play in the next 1 to 2 seasons. He's going to have to be a first team player in League Two.
Yeah,
he can't keep going out on loan to Kettering and various other things, which is great when you're really young. But you've either got to trust him and throw him in as number one, or you've got to have him at least a season with Flinders. And I think a season or two behind Flinders as number two, playing in the Johnson's playing Papa John's Pizza Stuffed Crust Cup. So that gives you
new sponsorship name next season.
Yeah, they can't get that on the shirts. That gives him probably 10 games a season in all the cups. And working behind Scott Flinders, who, like you say, I don't think he put a foot wrong in those games. I think the defence looked 10 times more assured. Keep him. We've got 2 goalkeepers. It would be a waste of money. It would be an absolute waste of money if you went out and spent another 2 or 3 grand a week on a goalkeeper that we really have done before and don't need.
In terms of positions that we need to strengthen, Jim, the big one is we need to replace Elliot Hewitt. But there is only one Elliot Hewitt.
There is, and I think, as Nick said, I think he's going to be a real loss. He's been our best player by a mile for the last year or so. He's a gamer as well, isn't he? He plays every week, well, till he got injured. And he's Mr. 8 out of 10 every week. But, it's sort of obvious what we need. We need cover at fullback, another centre-back, because I think Birch, really, his legs have gone. And, and a striker for me. I don't think we need too much. I don't.
I have to say on the Perch thing, obviously him and Quinn have both been offered new deals. I hope they both take them. I'm cautious over the Stephen Quinn one, Alan, because he's a superb player, passionate, really drives our midfield, but we cannot keep relying on him. And if he signs a new contract, because Clough trusts him, because he's worked with him before, and because we know he can do it, he will play more than probably what he should. The Perch one's a different one for me, because whilst he is a little bit slower than what he was, whilst his legs maybe have gone, I don't think for me, that's too much of a negative, because the way he reads a game, the way he captains, the way he leads, the way he steps in, all right, sometimes he'll make a few mistakes which come with age and come with playing where he's been playing, but he's as big of an impact person within that dressing room as Stephen Quinn for me.
Yeah, I'd agree with that, but in my opinion, I would keep him as squad players. If they're good enough, it doesn't matter whether they're 36, 37, 38, whatever. If they need to play, and like Quinny has done, and Perchie, to be fair, this season, because I've always said, I want somebody, if Perchie's playing, you need somebody who's sharp at the side of him, like your Harbottle was. And, players like that. But now we've got Kilgore, put him in the squad, leave him in the squad, and if needed, he'll do a damn good job, I'm sure, same as Quinn. But yes, definitely as squad players.
Clive, final thoughts on what we need to identify as well for the forthcoming season, because it's not just Elliot Hewitt's injury that we need to replace. We are in desperate need of a left back.
Both left and right backs need cover, no question about that. So it's a shame we've got to do it to have somebody to cover for a long-term injury to our best player, and we've had this hole in our plan for a season and a half in not having cover for the left backs, and that's got to happen. Just going back to Quinn very quickly, I distinctly thought he was waving goodbye to Colchester, to the fans, and he has said this is his last season, so he's going to have to be convinced to make a different decision. I think he might do. He's an emotional player. If he buys the emotional investment in the club next year, and I hope he does, because whilst he's not 46 90-minute games in him anymore.
Yeah.
In fact, there wasn't when we recruited him, but he's been pushed to work a lot harder and a lot longer than his body would have wanted him to. That's a circumstance. But I'd have liked him seeing it going into coaching, but apparently, according to Clough, he's never going to be a coach.
Yeah, he's got other interests, hasn't he?
He's got a shillelagh manufacturing company somewhere, I think.
Yeah, something like that. In the comments, final comments on the retain list, Nathan says, going into next season, I think Nigel needs to do subs earlier in a game. Yeah, we've covered that. I agree. Carl says, Flinders had one poor game Grimsby away in the Papa John's really early on, but when he had the run of games, he was brilliant. Again, I think that's probably just ring rusty. When he came in, when he needed to, it was absolutely superb. And final comment from Carl. The whole Johnson thing was handled poorly by both parties at the end of the day when he came back. I'd put my arm around him and said, whatever happened, you're here until the end of the season. Put it behind us and let's start afresh. A player of that quality is the difference and could have been the key to his getting promotion. Good luck to him in the future. Thanks so much for all your comments on that. One thing I did forget to do was reveal the award winners for the 2022-23 campaign. So I'm going to do that. And whilst I do that, could you hand around a couple of sheets of paper each, and then you're going to need something from in this little jar here because it is quiz time. You've got table there. So, Mansfield Matters End of Season Awards. We had a number of categories. The first one was the Impact Player of the Season Award, and it's no surprise. Anybody want to guess who won that one? Clive, want to have a guess between Kilgore, Aikens, Wallace and Hartigan? Kilgore was the winner with 96.6% of the vote. Underrated Player of the Season, a bit more of a tighter one on this one. Nominees were James Perch, Lucas Aikens, Will Swan and Kieran Wallace. Alan, guesses?
Aikens.
Nick, guesses?
If it wasn't Aikens, I'd go Wallace.
It was Wallace with 41.4% of the votes. I did not rig
We're all
that.
Craig.
We're not all me,
from
I'm not
Craig.
voted. Young Prospect of the Season. Nominees were Riley Harbottle, James Gale, Taylor Anson and Mikhail Abdullah. It's a landslide victory for James Gale with 89.7% of the vote. Sick Note of the Season is up next. The nominees were Anthony Hartigan, Stephen McLaughlin, Ollie Clark and John Joe Toole. The winner with 37.9% of the vote was Stephen McLaughlin. Then we had Listener's Choice. I failed to clarify what this was. So this was supposed to be your nomination for your actual player of the season, but I didn't make that clear. So people just put what they wanted. So I'm just going to read through some of the responses. Underrated, Ollie Clark. Davies Keeler Dunn, great addition to the squad. Alfie Kilgore. O'Toole. Jordan Bowery. Quinn.
O'Toole's dad do that.
Yeah. Nathan, Craig, Dunn, Kieran Wallace. Clive, you got a vote.
You're joking.
It's that goal was scored.
So your text did come through then?
Stephen Quinn, Elliot Hewitt, Alan, you got a mention.
Hey.
Rod Arnold also got a mention.
Rod Arnold.
Riley H got a mention. Jordan Bowery, Kieran Wallace, another one. I got another mention.
It is, yeah.
Choice of what? Question mark. Ollie Clark, Elliot Hewitt, and Cam. So I think Cam must have submitted a vote as well.
Yeah.
The next one is, this one's a bit of an arrogant, self-indulgent vote. We did it last year for a bit of a laugh. We've done it again this year. And it is for the coveted Podcaster of the Season Award.
Won again.
You always win.
The nominees were myself, Alan, Clive, Cam and Nathan, whoever they are. So, you're a sub for Cam today and technically for Nathan. So we'll put you in for them. And Nick, of course. Nathan got the 12% of the vote. Cam got 4% of the vote.
That's about right.
Nick, you drew with Cam, 4% of the vote.
You're joking.
In third place with 16% of the vote is Alan Wilson.
Blimey.
16.
In second place, with 20% of the vote, is CP. But which CP?
Yeah, which CP? Oh.
Second is Clive. I won it again. 44% of the vote. You're
Well
all 44%
Well
of you. You're all wrong, but thank you for all your love. And the final one, I always like to do this at the end of the season, is to give you guys at home, that camera, I don't want to keep looking at that camera, you guys at home the opportunity to send us a message, say anything you want about the show, that sort of thing. I always say be kind, so I'll only read the nice ones. Come on to that in a minute.
Can you find one?
Yeah, I can. There's 15 of them.
From somebody called C. Parker.
Yeah, Sea Priest.
Great podcast, love Clive.
Yeah. Thank you for a great season. It's been a pleasure to spend time with you and to get to know you, Craig and Clive. Looking forward to doing it all over again. That's from Chris, who we spend time with on the bus. Yeah. Thanks for another great season episode, chaps. As a Stags fan living in Hong Kong, the Mansfield Matters podcast really helps me stay connected and interested with the goings-on at the club. Really appreciate all of your efforts. A pleasure. Keep going. Always worth a listen. See you next season. This one's in all caps, so I'll read it how it reads. Great podcast. Look forward to next season. Up the Stags. Appreciate it. Thank you. See you all next season. Thoroughly enjoyed every podcast. You always make me laugh and have learned so much over the past few years. Keep up the good work.
That's from Clough, isn't it?
So many of us look forward to each podcast. Roll on next season. P.S. I have a big birthday on the 4th of June, which unfortunately we've missed. But no, we haven't, not yet. Happy birthday for the 4th of June, whoever you are. So please can I have a Mansfield Matters mug? Lol. Is this you? I've been badgering your season for a mug. If I can find one. Yes. I don't know. Well, there is. I have found one.
Oh no.
Which we're going to be playing for in a minute.
You're joking.
No pressure, Jim. You're going to win it.
Win it then, Jim.
Great effort. You're all wonderful. Great effort from both teams. A huge thank you very, very much. All good stuff. I love the optimism of Alan, the pessimism of Craig, and the information underlying Clive and Nick's comments. Also great that I disagree on occasion with one or two other podcast participants. Love the new female and feminine contributions. We'll be doing more of that this season. I often miss listening live and so contributing to the comments due to lack of notifications and short notice and a time zone difference. I'm sure the total listens and number of comments would increase if more and better notice was given. Absolutely, completely get that. The only reason, there's two reasons why we don't keep it consistent. The first one is algorithms. If you do something all the time at 7 p.m. on Facebook or whatever, it wouldn't deliver it to all of you. The second one is more practical. Nick's got a child, Cam's got a child, Nathan's got a child, although it doesn't matter to them too. Alan, you've got work commitments.
I've got a new sofa.
You've got a new sofa. I've got different work commitments. So we just try and fit it in when as many of us are available. But we will try and do as much as we can to try and keep it more consistent next year. By the way, the big birthday is from Kathy. Yes, I'll sort that for you if you sort the other thing out. You know what we're talking about. Chris, we're looking at you. You know what we mean, don't you? You know what I mean.
Go, Kathy.
Come on, Kathy. You know what you need to do. Back to the lovely
Love
comments.
is in the air.
Oh, no, it's not that, is it?
Oh, no.
John Paul Young. Have a 1-1.
Before we start.
Love listening. Better than watching Emmerdale. Can't disagree
Well,
with
that's
that.
not much, is it?
Really enjoy the podcast. Genuine fans with honest opinions. Another great season of podcasts. Great job, lads. All the podcasts have been brilliant, but Craig is the maestro. I didn't write that. Thank you so much for whoever said that.
That's your dad.
He wouldn't know how to work a Google form. Behave. Brilliant Mansfield Matters podcast all season, even with tech gremlins at times. Absolutely. VAR required for Clive's podcast predictions being capitulated back into contention with the Christmas triple pointers still gutted. Is that from you?
No, we're not guilty.
We'll do that in a minute. And bring on next season, a podcast promotion season. Much appreciated. Craig, Alan, Clive, and co. Absolutely. And a final one. Love the podcast, but please stop slagging off my substitutions, slagging off my tactical decisions. All the best. Love Cluffy.
No, you can't call him that.
Can't call him that. That's where it's false. So that's obviously made up. Appreciate all your lovely comments. Thanks so much. And on that as well, just want to say, thanks, Clive, that the podcast is all about opinions. The reason we sit down every week is to share our opinions, share our thoughts, and have a conversation about Mansfield Town, because that's our passion. It's like going to the pub. It's that thing, and it was really huge in COVID, and we wanted to keep it going. And I love a discussion, and I'm all for debate and discussion. And you know what? I genuinely don't care if somebody disagrees with my opinion. In fact, I welcome and encourage that, because it's the spark of a conversation. But if you're going to do that, if you're going to see something on social media and reply to it, that's absolutely fine. I don't mind that. But do it in a way which is an open conversation. Do it in a way where you can have a friendly debate, where you can have a friendly chat. Name calling and personal abuse is not okay and will never be okay. I don't care if you disagree with my opinion. Neither do any of the chaps in this room. Neither do anyone that's been on the podcast. That's the whole point of the podcast. Me and Alan disagree all the time over certain things. We have done tonight. But we're still friends, and we do it in a civilised way.
And I disagree with myself all the time.
Exactly. But what we don't do is we don't start calling each other names. We don't make it personal, because that's not what it's about. Those small minority of you that do make it personal, you are the problem and you are not welcome. But if you want to drop that and you want to just have it as a nice civilised conversation, then you are welcome. In a world where you can be anything, be kind. Speaking of which, it's quiz time.
No.
So for quiz time, you can play along at home if you want. You need a bit of a pen and paper. The guys here in the studio have got a pen and paper. We are playing for the coveted Mansfield Matters mug. I'll whiz through these questions as much as I can. Stian and Tim are there as well. I'm going to pop them on the screen as well, just so we can see them now as well, and see them. Make sure that there's no cheating going on. What do I need to do? I need to do that. Take it off full screen. There we go. There they are.
This is where I forget everything.
Let me just get my Google open.
That's it. Get your Googles off. So no Googling, fellas, and no shouting out the answers. We'll be watching. We'll come to you at the end for the answers. Right, so here we go. By the way, there are a total of 64 points that can be scored in this 10 question quiz. Okay, pens all working and everything?
No.
There we go, right. Question number 1. How many minutes into the season were we when we scored our first goal? How many minutes into the season were we when we scored our first goal? There are no options, it's just a guess. Question 2. What I've realised I need to do is I need to put a little bit of background music on here, because there'll just be a lot of time where we're just sat in silence. It'll pop up eventually. There we go. Right, question 2. Who was the first person to score from the penalty spot this season, and for a bonus point, against who? Who was the first person to score from the penalty spot, and for a bonus point, against who?
No idea. Don't worry about that.
Copy mine off.
Don't worry about that.
Question number 3. Between and including the 27th of August and the 24th of September, the Stags had just 1 home game and 5 away games in all competitions. Name the away games, 1 point for each.
God.
There are no points for the scores, it's just the teams, so you're guessing 5 teams. Between the 27th of August and the 24th of September, and including those dates, the Stags had just 1 home game and 5 away games. Can you name all 5 of the away games?
See, I went to every one of them. I can remember none of them.
There you go. We've got to write some down. You should write 5 down. Have a stab.
Chelsea.
They don't quite count.
I can't remember
Question 4. In October, the Stags won their first penalty shootout in over a decade. Who did they beat? And for a bonus point, that's 1 per player, name the successful penalty takers. So in October, the Stags won their first penalty shootout in over a decade. Who did they beat? And for a bonus point per player, name the successful penalty takers. We'll recap some of those questions later on for you. Question 5. Excluding league games, name our goal scorers from our cup competitions. That's the League Cup, the FA Cup, and the EFL Trophy. That's 1 point each, and I can tell you, there are 8 of them. So we had 8 goal scorers outside of league games, aka in cup games. Name them, 1 point each. League Cup, FA Cup, and EFL Trophy. To recap those for you, the EFL Trophy, of course, Manchester City under-21s, Grimsby, Derby, and then a trip to Everton, where we threw it away in the 90th minute. The League Cup, also Derby, and the FA Cup, Barrow and Sheffield Wednesday. 8 goals in those games. Who scored them? Now let's see who's been paying attention to the show tonight. Question 6. Name the top 5 players who picked up the most yellow cards, 1 point per player. So we ran through all those stats earlier on. Name the top 5 players who've picked up the most yellow cards. That's 1 point per player. Question 7. Everybody's favourite, it's anagram time. And I think we've got a new contender, so we all remember Randy Wands. How about strict fondles? Strict fondles is an anagram of which Stags player? That's STRICTFONDLES. Strict fondles.
Is this a current player?
It's a current Stags player.
Player of this
I've
season.
got that
Player of
straight
this
away.
season. Well done, Nick.
I've got
Christy
strict
Kim.
fondles.
Yeah, strict fondles. Have you got strict fondles?
I have, yeah.
Oh, there you go.
I'll blame Alan, but it's not.
Question 8. Harrogate Town and Sutton United continue to be our bogey sides. What were the scores in both games against both teams? That's 1 point per correct answer. So home and away against Sutton and Harrogate. Scores, please.
Oh, the time's run out.
Got another one? There's plenty.
Down. Do I get away with it?
I've got a notebook if you want to lean on that. A bit more. You got something to lean on?
Sorry, was that Harrogate and
Sutton.
Sutton?
Yeah. Question 9. This is the last serious one, really. And it's a list again.
You're on your list.
I know. This is where you're going to score points. According to data acquired from footballwebpages.co.uk, name up the top 10 players by appearances, that's starts and subs combined. And here's where it gets interesting. You get 1 point per correct answer, so a total of 10. You get double points if you get them in the correct order. No, sorry, you get double points, if you get all 10, and triple points if you get all 10 in order.
Oh, give it a rest.
So, according to data acquired by footballwebpages.co.uk, name the top 10 players by appearance, that starts and subs combined. If you're playing along at home, good luck. Stian and Tim are looking pensive, trying to figure out the answers to the questions. We'll get them in for their answers shortly. I'll recap the questions for anybody that missed them earlier on, whilst it gives you time to do that list. Question 1 was how many minutes into the season were we when we scored our first goal? Question 2 was who were the first person to score from the penalty spot and against who? Question 3, between and including the 27th of August and the 24th of September, the Stags had just 1 home game and 5 away games in all competitions. Name those away games. Question 4 was in October. The Stags won their first penalty shootout in over a decade. Who did they beat? And for a bonus point per player, name the successful penalty takers. Question 5 was excluding league games. Name our goal scorers from our cup competitions. That's League Cup, FA Cup and EFL Trophy. Question 6 was name the top 5 players who picked up the most yellow cards. Question 7 was strict fondles. Who is it? Question 8 was Harrogate Town and Sutton United are our bogey sides and continue to be. But what were the scores in both games against both opponents this season? And where we are now, question 9. According to data acquired from footballwebpages.co.uk, name the top 10 players by appearance that starts and subs combined. The final question, we asked this in every Mansfield Town quiz since Nigel Clough has been appointed. Question 10. Who is the Stags' assistant manager? So they should get at least 1 point apiece. Right, whilst you're finishing that up, I'm going to go over to Tim in Brazil. Come in, Tim in Brazil. How do you think you did in that one?
Terrible. I can't remember what I had for lunch.
Well, we'll see how you did later.
That was question 11.
That was question 11, actually.
Cheese sandwich, I've got that.
Steen, I'm going to come back to you. How do you think you did?
I'm struggling still. That ninth one was. Yeah.
Well, there you
I
go.
backed myself going into this, but this is.
We'll pop you back on mute for now. I will unmute you when.
I think 5 will
when
be a
we're
winning
ready.
score here.
Right, Jim.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's on you. Microphone, please. Otherwise, I won't be able to hear you. I can hear you, but the lovely people at home won't be able to. You have badgered me all season for one of these. I said I couldn't find one. Might have lied. So we could do this. In this box, right here, is what I think is the last Mansfield Matters mug.
Get a bit nervous now.
I'll stick with that.
Touch it.
Nope. Take it away. You got the chance to win this.
Come on, Jim.
How do you think you've done?
Not bad. I don't definitely not got them all, but
Well, you're going to be the man for the answers here. Question 1. Mark your own. How many minutes into the season were we when we scored our first goal? Clive.
117.
Jim, what did you get? Microphone, please. Keep that in your hand if you don't mind.
36.
Alan.
108.
Nick.
120.
Oh, is this overall or in the game?
How many minutes into the season were when we scored our first goal?
Yeah. No, I've got it wrong.
The correct answer was 150.
No.
Well done.
That's closest. You get a point for being closest?
No.
Oh,
You're
come on.
joking.
Oh, now you're going to get back on.
All right. No, right. I'll check with our 2 international guests.
Oh, no, I don't want to point.
No.
We don't give points out for nothing.
Stin, what did you have?
I had 128.
128.
No, we don't give you points.
Yeah.
Tim, what did you have?
120.
Hey.
1 point for Stin, half a point for Nick and Tim.
Thank you.
That'll do. Question 2: who was the first person to score from the penalty spot, and against who? Stin, what did you just get?
I have Oates against Wimbledon.
Correct answer. Question
Yay.
3: between and including the 27th of August and the 24th of September, 1 home game, 5 away games in all competitions. Name the away games. Clive, you went to all 5, so I'm going to come to you.
I've got Chelsea, Arsenal, West Ham, and Stranraer. I can't remember the others.
Incorrect. Nick, I'm going to come to you.
I think I've got these terrifically wrong. I've got Doncaster,
Yes.
Harrogate,
No.
Sutton,
Yes.
Barrow,
No.
and Crewe.
Yes.
So I got 3.
Yes. The correct answers: Sutton United, Doncaster Rovers, Gillingham, Grimsby
Gillingham.
in the Pizza Crust Cup, and Crewe. In October, the Stags, for question 4, won their first penalty shootout in over a decade. Who did they beat? Tim, who did they beat?
Derby.
Correct answer. And for bonus points, the successful penalty takers, Alan Wilson, were...
Law, Barry, Gale.
Will Swan, George Lapsley, Elliot Hewitt, James Gale, Ollie Clark, and Ollie Hawkins.
What a four.
Well done if you got all
You get a point
6.
each plus a point for Derby.
Yes, 1 point for Derby to clarify, and 1 point per correct
So
person.
that's why.
That's nil plus nil.
No plus no. Clive's doing well. Question 5, excluding league games, cup goal scorers. Jim.
Hawkins, Lapsley, Gale, Oates, Hewitt.
Hawkins, Maris, Lapsley, Akins, Gale, Lapsley, and Oates. So Hawkins got 2, Lapsley got 2. So Hawkins, Maris, Lapsley, Akins, Gale, and Oates were the correct answers.
I'm off the mark, lads.
Well done. Let's see if you get any more with this one, Clive. Top 5 players who were yellow carded, please.
Birch, Clark, O'Toole, Quinn, Hawkins.
Perch, Clark,
O'Toole. Quinn.
Perch and Clark. You got? Did you say Quinn?
I said Quinn. and
Yeah.
Hawkins.
No,
O'Toole.
no. Wallace and Harbottle were the other 2. Quinn with 9,
Three.
Clark with 8, Perch with 8, Wallace with 7, and Harbottle with 6.
Three.
Nick, you got this one straight away. You said strict
Yeah.
fondles.
I think Strict Fondles and Scott Flinders.
Correct answer.
Scotland.
Question 8, Steve, I'm coming to you. Harrogate Town and Sutton continue to our bogey side. What were the
Yep.
scores in both games?
So Sutton away, 2-1 loss.
Correct?
Goalless draw at home.
Correct?
Oh.
And Harrogate 3-0 away
Yes?
and 2-1 at home.
Correct
Yeah.
answer.
Yeah.
Four points.
Is that 4 points then?
4 points. 4
Yeah.
points. 4 points.
He's got the fixture list behind his screen there.
Yeah. No cheating. Right, here's the big one. Alan, I'm going to come to you for this one. According to data acquired by footballwebpages.co.uk, the top 10 players by appearances, start and subs combined. Give me your list,
Dudley
please.
Roberts.
Him, Birch, Hewitt, Clark, Hawkins, Akins, Maris, Quinn, Oates, and Barry.
You got a few, so you can tick off them, but you didn't get them all in order,
No.
and you didn't get all 10. Let's see if anybody
I do
did.
apologise.
In order,
What?
so you should. In order, top. I didn't write down how many they got, so let me just find my sheet again. The top 10 were Elliot Hewitt on 46.
Yeah.
Christy Pym was just behind on 45.
Yeah.
Stephen Quinn then in third with 44.
Yeah.
Lucas Akins in fourth with 43.
Yeah.
Jordan Barry with 42.
Yeah.
James Perch with
What
42.
a roll.
Hiram Boateng on 40. Ollie Clark on 40. George Maris on 39. And in at 10 was Riley Harbottle with 35. Did anybody get all 10?
No.
Stan? No.
Eight.
Tim? No.
No.
8. 8.
8.
Happy with it? Yeah.
What I'm going to do, I'm going to give
Happy
you,
with 8.
I'm going to go around all of you, just give me a number. I'm going to give a bonus point for the people who get the highest. Tim, you said 8. Stan, you said?
For the 9th, I think I got 4.
Jim?
8.
8.
8.
8.
I struggled to name 10 players who weren't injured, so I got 7.
Clive?
6.
Bonus points to Alan, to Jim, and to Tim. Well
Oh,
done.
giving them away for nothing these days.
I know,
on
I'm
the
being
podcast.
I
kind.
could only remember 6.
And the final question, we pushed for time. The final question, we've got 5 minutes left, let's get through it. Who is the Stags assistant manager? Clive?
Bing Crosby.
Close.
About to say that.
No cigar. No cigar.
Gary Cross.
Gary Crosby is the correct answer. So, Tim, count up your points, please.
10, 12.
How many points did you get?
17 and a half.
Stian,
23.
Clive,
18.
Nick.
I'm not ruling out a Christmas and end of season double here, but 27 and a half.
Oh, Alan.
I think I'm just saying a recap. I think I've got 27.
You're
No way.
Well,
These need independently checking. These
1, 9, 10,
That
11.
half a point's going to win, isn't it?
Yeah, finally. Score.
Sorry, now 24.
Oh.
Sorry,
A
24.
point for every, some of the questions, a point for every score and the Who we played against?
Where are you
The
struggling?
Derby one, yeah.
I'll clarify.
The Derby one.
So Derby won, 1 point for Derby County, and then 1 point for Will Swan, 1 point for George Lapsley, 1 for Elliot Hewitt, 1 for James
Well done,
Gale,
Well,
1 for Ollie Clark, and
well
1
done,
for
mate.
Ollie
And the
Hawkins.
cup scorers.
Celebrating.
1
No.
point each.
You got it.
Hawkins, Maris, Lapsley, Akins, Gale, Oates, 6.
And the Sutton and Harrogate scores, is that just 1
1 point per game.
1
So
point per game?
yeah,
Right,
so there's
okay.
4 there. So if you said 2-1,
I got all 4 of them.
I got 3 of them.
I got 3. I put 1-1. We lost 2-1, didn't we?
Yeah.
It's great how we all remember the disappointing results.
I know.
If you had to name like 4 wins, we wouldn't get it.
what have we got? Couple of close this.
29?
Hey,
Hey!
That's what he got.
What's going on here?
Ladies and gentlemen,
Yeah,
he's
yeah,
been on the
check
podcast. He's been on the podcast twice. He's been badgering me for a month or
I'm
so.
checking. Hang on a minute. Hang on a minute. What's going on here?
It gives me great pleasure
Well done, Jim.
to present you in the Mansfield Matters Podcast. Well done. Tim, thanks so much for getting involved with that. Your contributions this season have been much welcome. Join us again next season.
Oh, yes.
Surely.
Absolutely. Have a fantastic close season, guys. We will see you again soon. Thanks so much for joining us. And to you guys at home as well, thanks so much for joining us. Before we go, we've got one last order of business to wrap up, and that, of course, is who has won the coveted podcast predictions table. It was tight. Nick, on the final day of the season, you had a significant score.
No, it's not. It's not that.
Well done, son.
But it's not you.
It's not.
You, out of our podcast predictions group, you finished bottom. But to say that you started late
I'm going to say.
And forgot quite a lot.
and forgot quite a lot of times, the points gap between me and you in the end was 6. You finished
Next
on
season,
33. I finished on 39. And for once, Nathan didn't win. Get in there. He finished on 43 points. Cam finished on 47. And then it's between Alan and Clive for who won. But I can't say yet because we've got the overall table to do as well. Thanks so much to all of you that took part and got involved. I'm going to give a mention to the people that got on the scoreboard. These people, some of these people got 1 or 2, which means they played 1 or 2 weeks and then forgot. But Lee Taylor, Paul England, James Radford, Adam Parkin, Alfie Foster, Jamie Henson, Harrison, Fraser, Mel Speddin, James Wood, Bart, Ollie B, Rob Siddons, Stags Chat, Mitchell McNear, Kyle, Greg Taylor, Craig Foster, Alex Cartwright, Random Nathan, Keeley Parsons, who we've had on the podcast, Craig Wiles, Andy Bells, Nathan Bower, and Tom Parry. You all scored 10 or below. Thanks for your contributions. Moving upwards, it was Stian Knutsford with 11 points. Well done, Stian. Proud Stags then with 13. Craig Vincent with 22. Steve Yull, 22. Ashley Mutter, 24. Nick of Mansfield Town Shirts fame with 33. Me in 15th place with 39. Kiwi Stag then with 40, as did Tim Phillips. Nathan Edge with 43, joint with Nick Felton, who got 43. Adam Crump finished on 44. JS finished on 45, as did David Shetlife. Roger King finished on 46. Cam on 47. Ben Swain, who I owe a massive, massive thanks to for doing all of the maths and the keeping of
Well
the
done,
scores.
Ben.
Thank you, Ben. Finished in 5th.
Well done, Ben. Checks in the post, mate.
Kathy, there's no check. Kathy Holmes finished just outside the top 3 in
Well done,
4th
Kathy.
with 48. Steve Nadin finished in 3rd with 55. And then it's between Alan Wilson and Clive Parkin. Alan predicted a 2-0 win.
Correct.
At Colchester. If you'd have predicted us to finish outside of the playoffs and shown 1 ounce of pessimism, you would have beaten Clive.
Oh no!
Well,
You lost out by the narrowest of margins because you
My
predicted
goal.
us to finish in the playoffs. How do you feel?
I'd still do it. I'd still do it tomorrow, mate.
Oh,
A
Optimism,
massive,
better than pessimism.
a massive congratulations to Clive
Well done,
Parkin,
Clive.
our winner, who finishes the season
Well
on
done,
63
mate.
points.
Pessimism
Round of
Parkin
applause for
wins
Clive,
today.
everybody. Well done.
well done, Clive.
To Clive. That is all we've got time for on tonight's Mansfield Matters podcast and this series of the Mansfield Matters podcast. My thanks, as ever, to everybody that's been on the podcast this season. Whether it's someone like Keely or Emma or any of the girls that came on and did the Her Game 2 podcast at the Capo Lounge, which was absolutely phenomenal. My thanks go to you. Whether it's Jim, who's popped up on the phone, or Stian, or Tim in Brazil that's popped up online, whether it's a one-episode contribution or the entirety of the season contribution, we thank you. Thanks so much to Jim. Thanks for coming. Thanks so much to Mr. Alan
It's
Wilson.
great.
Thanks to
It's
Nick of
great.
Mansfield Town Shirts. Thanks to Clive. And thanks to you guys at home as well for watching. It's been a long season of ups, downs, ins, outs, and the narrowest of margins. No matter whether you agree with our opinions or not, no matter whether you think I talk rubbish or Clive does or whatever, the fact that you've joined us and the fact that you've interacted and engaged with the conversation is something which means the most to us. We now go into a period of rest. There'll be no podcast for a few weeks, but we will be back for next season. Damn right we'll be back for next season. You can't stop us. Series 7. Do you believe that, Alan? Series 7.
Yeah.
I think, Clive, you're now probably the longest serving now on the show.
Well, technically Cam and
Yes.
Nathan,
Yeah.
but they seem to have gone into hibernation.
Yes. Hopefully they'll be back next season. Fingers crossed they're always there. Everyone is always welcome. Realistically, though, all I want to say is to you guys here, a massive thank you, because this season it came as no surprise. Obviously, last year we had the commentary stuff, we had the stuff from being inside the dressing room, which was great. We really took the podcast up another level, really enjoyed that. This season we didn't have that, and for me personally, that was a horrendous time. I didn't want to go to games, but I pushed myself because of this podcast, and you guys coming on every week gave me a reason to keep doing it, and you'll give me a reason to keep doing it again next season. So my thanks to all of you, and my thanks to you at home, the viewer, the listener, whatever it is you are, you make Mansfield Matters. We'll see you again next season, because whether we fall out of the playoffs by one goal, whether it's an injury or a late substitution or whatever, it doesn't matter. The only thing that does matter always is Mansfield. We'll see you again next year for another Mansfield Matters podcast. Good night, goodbye, enjoy the summer.